Hello, I'm Devlin Peck, and today we're exploring how to use layers in Articulate Storyline. So these are one of the key building blocks for interactivity in Storyline. I've prepared a file for us to look at here today so I can demo all of this, and I also have some challenges for you throughout. In case you saw the triggers video, it's going to be the same type of deal. So if you want to download this file, you can do so with the link in the description. But let's dive right into it. So just like states, layers are one of these key building blocks for interactivity in Storyline. So if you know your way around states, triggers, and now layers, which is the third video we're getting into in this series, then you are going to be in very, very good shape with building out custom interactions. And as the name may imply, you may be familiar with layers because of a tool like Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop is where a lot of people know layers from. It's basically a way to stack things on top of the slide. So each layer, you look, I have a few layers down here in the bottom right on this slide. Each layer kind of stacks more things on top of the base layer. That's what we call this layer at the very bottom. You know, when you create a new slide and you start adding stuff to it, you're adding to the base layer. If you want to create a new layer on top of the base layer to show some images, some shapes, some text, and block out whatever is on the base layer, you can actually create a new layer with this button down here in the bottom right. And I'm going to hide my camera because we need to be doing stuff down in the bottom right in this video. So this new layer button is what you can click. When you click on it, it will create a new layer at the top of the stack. As you can see, once it's created, nothing's actually on the layer, things will look a bit dimmed out. If we go to the base layer, it's nice and vibrant. If we go to this untitled layer we created, we can tell it's dimmed. It's not going to look like that in the final product. It's just to make it easier for you as the developer to tell what's on this layer and what's not. And you can uncheck this little dim box, and then you can see it will show you what's actually on the base layer there. But if we recheck the dim box, it is dim once more. So for me to just illustrate this, I'm going to preview this, and I made it so that when you click on this show layer button, it shows this first layer called one circle. So then it's going to show this. When you click on this circle, then it shows this next layer in the stack, which is called more circles. You see, and then when you click on that, it's going to show this rectangle layer. And we're going to see how this all works together by default. So by default, when we show a layer, it covers anything that's on the base layer. So that button, that show layer button, watch if we replay this button will still be here, but when I click on show layer, that new layer just covers up everything beneath it. So we just can't see that button anymore. If we click on this circle, notice now on this next layer, we're seeing the two circles that were on that more circles layer, but we can also see through to the base layer, so we can still see that original button because now there's nothing here in the middle covering it up. And then finally, if we click on one of these, it will show that third layer, which is the rectangle, and that covers up everything beneath it as well. So that's what's going on here, right? So it's only showing one layer at a time. As soon as we click this and try to see this next layer, it basically just, it's as if we were never on this layer in the first place. It just hides this one and brings us to that one. The reason for that, and again, this is pretty easy to figure out once you start playing with layers, but where it starts getting more complex is when you look at the layer properties. Okay, so if we click on one of these layers, for example, look in the very bottom right of this window, and you will see this gear icon. That's how we edit slide and layer properties. So with this one circle layer selected, let's click on this edit properties button. Notice we have an option here, which is checked. Hide other slide layers. So if this is checked, then whenever you get to one of these layers that has it checked, any other layers that were open are going to immediately get hidden. And all you're going to see is what's on the base layer. But notice we have this option as well, hide objects on the base layer. So if we do that, now you notice as soon as I check that, all the other stuff that we could see slightly dimmed out on this slide, it just disappears because this wouldn't show us a single thing on that base layer. So those are the two ones. Let's experiment with those at first. So I'm just going to uncheck hide other slide layers for now. I want to show you there are a couple of more ways to access that. You could just double click on it, just like how if you double click on a trigger to edit a trigger, like I showed you in the last video. And if you missed the triggers video, definitely watch that one. It's very important. You can do the same thing by just double clicking on a layer. It will open it right up. So those are the two main ways to do it. You could double click on it. You could right click on it and click on properties, or you could click on it and then click on this wheel or this gear in the bottom right. And similarly, we could change those properties for multiple of these layers at a time. So notice I just clicked on one. I'm going to hold down Shift and then click on the very top one. And now we have all three of those layers selected. Now I can click on this gear icon and I'm going to turn off this option to hide other slide layers. Okay, so with that off, I'm going to press close. It should have updated for all of them. And now when we preview this, it's going to be a slightly different experience. Okay, first I'll show that first layer. Great. Now I'm going to click this again. It's going to show that next layer with the two circles on it. But now notice when we get to that layer with the two circles, we see a layer beneath because we're not hiding that first layer we were on. So again, just to show you what's going on here, we were on the base layer, then we show the circle, which appears over that button. And then on this next layer, again, we only have these two circles here, but we turned off the setting to hide this layer. So we can see these two circles as well as see beneath it onto this circle. And then just because of how layers work, they cover up anything on the sides beneath them. If we go to that final layer, this rectangle still covers up everything else that we could possibly see. So those are the basics, and that's why knowing how these properties work is very important because it's going to change how your layers function quite significantly. Let's look at something here. So let's try this. I'm gonna just move this circle like over here. We don't need that right now because let's imagine when we get to this more circles layer here, right now, if we do this, we're gonna see that show layer button through, right? So if we preview this, watch now. So we're gonna show the layer, we're gonna click on this one. We can still see this show layer button. Let's say we don't wanna see that, okay? We just don't wanna see that show layer button anymore. One option you may think of is to go into these settings here and choose to hide objects on the base layer. But you can see when we click that, that's going to hide everything on the base layer. Okay, that's not exactly what we're going for here. So let's uncheck that because we might still want it to say layers 101. What we can actually do is down here in the timeline. So if you look at my mouse now in the timeline, it shows the two ovals that are on this layer, but it also lets us access these base layer objects. So if I click on that little arrow to reveal these base layer objects, now we can see that show layer button and we can see this little visibility icon to the left of it. So if we click on show slash hide, now that button disappears and this will only be true for this layer. So this is a really cool feature to be aware of that it took me honestly longer than I'd like to admit to know that this was an option. Instead of having to like use a trigger and like hide stuff from the base layer that way, you can literally just come down here in the timeline and choose what you want to show and hide directly from here. And now if we preview this, you will see we can show the layer, boom, and then it actually disappears only for this layer. So we can see it on when the first layer is shown, but because of that setting, we hit it on the next one. So that's really, really neat. Let's see, is there anything else in here you should know of? Okay, this one's pretty self-explanatory. Hide slide layer when timeline finishes. You know, sometimes you might want to do that. Maybe you just want like a warning to appear for a few seconds. This is a really easy way for that to appear and then disappear when the timeline runs out. Notice this timeline is 5 seconds long. I could drag this down to like 2 seconds. And now if we preview this, when I show this first layer, it's going to last 2 seconds and then it's going to disappear and we're back on the base layer. And we could do that over and over again every time we click this button. So these properties, that's what this video is mainly going to help you out with, because once you learn how to modify all of these properties, then layers are going to make you're going to have much better control over layers. And of course you can explore the programming I did to make all of this work. It's pretty straightforward though. Another thing that may be interesting to be aware of is like you can change the order of these. So like if I click and drag this rectangle down to the bottom, and then move this over here, like they're going to stack on each other. Like, you know, they stack from the bottom up essentially. So if I have this layer show me that rectangle one instead, whoops, if I want to show the rectangle layer, and then from the rectangle layer, I want to show this one circle layer, the circle is going to appear on top, right? I think that you probably understand why that happens that way now. Watch, I'll click show layer. Then when I click on this, it's going to show that next layer up in the stack. And then this shows on top of it instead of behind it. So there we go. I think those are the essentials. And then there's just like the basic stuff, like you can rename layers if you want to by double clicking on the actual like text part of it. To actually edit it, you have to double click like outside of the title. I should have been clearer about that earlier. And then another cool feature is you can like copy a layer from one slide and then come over here and like paste it onto another slide just by right clicking copy and then right clicking paste, or you can do Control C, Control V. Again, if you want to see all the storyline shortcuts, go ahead and grab that keyboard shortcuts PDF with the link in the description. It could save you a lot of time. But there it is. There's one more of these things right here that might seem confusing to you if you're new to Storyline. This allow seeking option, okay? And to demo this, I am going to, don't mind me here. I'm just going to turn on the seek bar for the base layer, okay? We'll cover, maybe we'll do a whole video on how the player works in a later time. But see, this is the seek bar at the bottom. You see how that little thumb is like running that whole 5 seconds of the timeline? What that other option you saw does is like, here, actually I need to show you one more step. If you go to a layer, it's still going to be showing the seek bar for the base layer. Watch, show layer. That's still the seek bar for the base layer. It doesn't actually apply to this one. But what you could do is if you go into these layer properties, allow seeking, you could set to yes, and then this layer will have its own seek bar instead of relying on the base layer seek bar. So here we go. This is running on the base layer. If we show layer, it starts itself back over. So this will be really helpful if you have like animations that play on the layer or like a video and you want it to have its own seek bar. There are very few cases where you need to do that because you'd probably be better off using like a new slide at that point, but just know, I want you to, know what each of these options refers to. But let's get to something a little bit more fun. I feel like I just talked at you for a while. So here we go. We have a challenge for you. So, and this is an actual challenge for you. So if you do download this file and you practice this is a great way to get some practice with layers. So my challenge for you is to make these generate buttons display all of the shapes and then make the reset button down here at the bottom hide all of them so that we can start back over. So you see I have a layer with squares, a layer with circles, and a layer with triangles. My challenge for you, make it so that when I click on this button, it shows me the squares, and then so on and so forth, so that all of them can appear at the same time. And then when I click on reset, I want them all to disappear again, so I can just keep going right back over. So go ahead and download this with the link in the description and then give it a try. And when you're ready to see the reveal, go ahead and play the video. So pause the video now, give this a shot, and I'll see you in a second. All right. Hopefully you were able to figure that out. Let's dive into the programming. So first up, let's go ahead and click on the Generate Squares button. We'll create a new trigger. And if you're not sure how to use the triggers, again, make sure you watch the last video. But we'll create that trigger. We will show layer squares when the user clicks the Generate Square button. Nice and easy. I'm going to copy this trigger with the copy button, click on the Generate Circles button, and then paste that trigger in, because then all I need to do is change the show layer to circles because it changes the object for me automatically, right? Because I pasted it after selecting where I want it. Again, we covered all of that in the last video. And then finally, I'll do the same thing with Generate Triangles so that when the user clicks Generate Triangle button, it shows the layer triangles. Now let's preview this and see how we do. So we'll generate the squares. Now let's see. Sure enough, we try to generate the next ones and it hides what we saw previously. You probably remembered, but we need to go ahead and select all of these. We need to open up the layer properties and we need to uncheck this box to hide other slide layers because we don't want to hide them. We want them all to be able to appear at once. Now we can preview this again and see if we're getting any closer. Generate squares, generate circles, and generate triangles. Perfect, it works. Our reset button doesn't work though because we haven't actually done anything with that yet. So if you have any guesses on what to do, the answer is to actually hide each of the layers when the user clicks the reset button. So we'll click on the reset button, create a new trigger, and the action in this case, instead of show layer, it's going to be hide layer. And we want to hide layer triangles when the user clicks that button. I'm going to just copy and paste that again, and then change triangles to squares, and then paste it again and change triangles to circles. So now we have these 3 triggers so that when someone clicks the reset button, it hides the triangles layer, the squares layer, and the circles layer. And that should be the full reveal. If we preview this, we will see we can click on each of these, and then we click on reset, and it resets. Even if we click on one, we can reset it. You get the idea. So great job if you figured that out. That shows a good understanding of both triggers and layers. But let's get slightly more complex now. If you don't understand, maybe rewatch this, maybe rewatch the triggers video. But when you're ready to move along, we are going to the animation station next. All right, so if you understand what's going on here, you're pretty much exactly where you need to be for any kind of professional storyline work with layers. Okay, so here we have it. We have this animated circle, and it takes 15 seconds to take its sweet time across the slide. All I did is I added a 15-second long fly-in animation from the left. Okay, we also have this squares layer. So whenever I show this squares layer, this group of these squares moves across the screen from the left all the way out to the right. Also takes them 15 seconds. So let me show you what that's like. When I click on this show layer button, the squares start coming in. And then if I hide layer, I can hide them. And if I show the layer, they start back over and they move in from the beginning. The reason I'm showing you this is because what if we want to hide the layer, but then when we show that layer again, it picks up right back where it was. That's what we're looking at here. We're looking at these options to how we handle revisits. So by default, every single slide you create in Storyline and every single layer will have this automatically decide option selected when you're revisiting. So we have two other options. So we can reset the layer to its initial state, and that's how it was acting here, because we could tell every single time we reopen this layer, it started the timeline back over here at the very beginning because this started animating in from the very left again. But what we could do, instead of letting Storyline decide, and Storyline is choosing to reset to the initial state, we can resume the saved state. And what that does is it will bring us right back to wherever we left off. So if we let this layer play for 5 seconds and then we hide the layer, it basically pauses the timeline right here at 5 seconds, and then it doesn't resume that timeline until we go back to that layer. And it does that instead of kicking us back to the 0 second mark whenever we revisit. So if we preview this now, it's going to have a very different effect because it should save the position of those squares. You see? So they're just frozen there. If I return it, they keep moving. I can pause it again. The last one was like right here. I can wait here as long as I want. As soon as I click show layer, that last square will be right back in that same position again. So there we have it. That's something important to keep in mind too, because for example, if you do have things animating in on a layer and you want those animations to play every single time someone gets to that layer, you need to make sure that this is set to reset to initial state. On the other hand, if you only want them to animate in the first time someone sees it and then you want them to be there like static, then we will want to make sure that this is resume saved state. So keep that in mind. Those two have very different effects on the user experience that you'll need to be aware of. And then let's look at this reset slide button. If you have an idea of how, well, actually, no, this is going to be kind of tricky, but let me show you something else. Just like we can open the properties of the layers, you can open the slide properties of the actual base layer of the slide itself. So we're going to select this base layer and then click on the edit properties gear down here. And we have this same option here when revisiting. So what we can do is we can change when revisiting to reset to initial state. And you'll see this is a really cool development pattern if you get what's going on here. We're going to make it so every time we come back to this slide, we're going to reset to the initial state. Now, what do you think is going to happen if I preview this, show the layer, and then hide the layer? Let me show you. You may be thinking, okay, we're going to show the layer here, but when we hide the layer, we're like returning to the slide, so it's going to reset to the initial state. That's not the case. You see, so we're actually the base layer is always here. We're not like revisiting it because we're never leaving it. Just because we're showing a layer on top of it, that doesn't count as like a revisit once we hide that layer. What we can do to revisit the slide is to use a trigger that has us jump to the slide that we're already on. So this is, again, a slightly more advanced pattern. Hopefully, if you do have more storyline experience and you're watching this, you're getting something out of it. but we're creating an action to jump to the slide, this slide, when the user clicks reset slide. And the reason this works is because we're going to click on this. Storyline's going to say, okay, we're jumping somewhere. Let's jump back to this slide that we're already on. And let's look at this setting right here and see what we're supposed to do. Because it's going to count as a revisit. And because we have it to reset to the initial state, it's going to start this animation over because it's going to bring this all the way back to 0 seconds on the timeline. Another option we could have done is like, just jump to 0 seconds on the timeline, but this pattern comes in handy for a lot of things other than just resetting the timeline. So there you have it. If we click on reset slide, it starts itself back over. Even if the layer is open, it's going to jump back and reset everything. So if you really understand what I just showed off on this slide, you are going to be in a very good spot with layers. I definitely suggest practicing with that, playing around with these different settings and see how it affects the experience. And if you picked up on it, you may notice there's actually another way you can handle this programming with only one trigger instead of 3. So if you want to see if you know what I'm talking about, pause the video and see if there's a way that you can reset, making all of these disappear without using 3 triggers. Okay, here is the reveal. I'm going to disable each of these 3 triggers we had, and I'm going to create a new one that says jump to slide, this slide, when the user clicks the reset button, and I'm going to change the slide properties so that it resets to the initial state when revisiting. So it's exactly what we just did, and now you'll see instead of needing those 3 triggers, we only need a single trigger to reset, because it resets all of the layers too when we reset that slide to its initial state. It resets the timeline, it resets the layers, and that's how we can get a fresh slate. So very good development pattern to get the hang of there. Okay, I think I may have one slide left for you. Oh yeah, this will be a good one. So this is probably closer to something you would like actually do when you are developing in Storyline. Maybe you have like a quiz question and different layers show off different feedback. So I'm going to preview this and show what we're working with. If we click on one of these, it shows some feedback. Oh, I only programmed it out for the first one, but it's simple enough. When you click on it, we're going to show the corresponding layer. And then when you click on the little X, it hides the layer. So pretty simple programming. But I want to show you another feature here in the layer properties. So I'm just going to double click on like choice C feedback, for example. Whoops. There we go. And notice this big section in the center here. Storyline didn't used to have this, but it is like a newer feature. So by default, it's going to present as a layer. You could set this to present as a dialog box. And look at the effect that has. It blacks out the rest of the screen, and it makes it so that you cannot click on anything on any other layers. So basically everything outside of like this layer, you can't click on it, and it's dimmed out to bring all of the focus right where we want it. There are also some accessibility options here. So the label, you can pick on something on your screen that you want it to read as like the title of this. And then for the description, that would read as like the purpose of this dialog box. So we don't really have a purpose included on this screen, but I'm going to preview this and show you the difference in the visual effect here. So if we preview, if we click on choice A, you see, nothing behind it gets really dimmed out. If we click on choice C, then everything else other than what is highlighted gets completely dimmed out, including the player. You can see even the player buttons we can't interact with them when a dialog box is open. So that's powerful. I haven't found a need to use that, but if you have found any cool ways to use that or any ideas around how to use it, let us know in the comments. It is an interesting feature, which reminds me there's one thing I probably could have showed you earlier. I'm going to go back to showing this like one circle layer when we click on this. Check this out. So when I click on show layer, it shows that circle. Whoops, let me replay this. It shows that circle, but I could still click on this show layer button. It's like still interactive. What you could do is you can go into the slide properties here and make it so that you can prevent the user from clicking on other slide layers. All right, so that's something I didn't want to forget. You could make it, without making it a dialog box, you could still make it so that only what's on this layer is interactive. And then similarly, if you do want the user to be able to click a button on the base layer, kind of like we were on this slide, when we have all of these open, we might be on the triangles layer, but that reset button is still functional. If we had this set to prevent the user from clicking on other layers, we wouldn't ever be able to reset this unless we had that button like copied and pasted onto each of these layers. So once you realize that, you can make use of buttons on the base layer. It is a really good way to save yourself like programming multiple buttons that you might not need. And then finally, the last little setting in there that you may have seen is to pause the timeline of the base layer. I should have showed you that when we were on this animation station slide, but just check this out because this is another thing that may make sense for you to do. If we're playing something and then we show this layer, notice how the base layer now, that timeline got paused. So then once we go back to the base layer, it resumes. So pretty cool how how those interact. That would make a lot of sense if you were, if you had like narration on your base layer that was just like playing, and then the user like clicked on an informational layer. You wouldn't want the base layer to keep talking while they're trying to read some information. So you would use that pause timeline of the base layer setting while the user is like reading that informational layer. So good to know your options there. I think we covered all of the pieces. That's layers. There's kind of a lot to it, but once you get comfortable with it, you should be good to go. Go ahead and download the practice file with the link in the description if you'd like it. I think the next storyline video we're going to do is all about how to use groups. So more videos are coming. Check out the whole playlist if you want. I'll include a bunch of helpful links in the description, and I will see you in the next video.